the part of the week, and it conveniently comes at the end of the week. I think that's wise because we want to know what happened the week gone by and what it all means. And to do that together, we invite some of our favorite journalists from around the region and around the state. And when we put them up on the internet, you can watch the show on YouTube or Facebook. You just search KUOW Public Radio. I think Anna King and Jane Hu seem to be in their home. And Jas Keimig, I like to imagine that you're in front of a giant mural that you personally painted. Yes, it is groovy. Welcome.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. It's good. Good to see all of you. So that's the stranger staff writer, Jas Keimig, and Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent, Anna King. Anna, you got your first big freeze this week in the Richland area, I understand.
Yeah, my husband has been digging his sweet potatoes like mad. And since he's a scientist, he weighs each plant and the yield he's gotten off of each plant. So it's pretty crazy over here in my crawl space.
Can you tell anything about the yield yet? Because all year we've been talking about the yield because of the heat dome and and the fires and the smoke and the rain. What is it? How are the sweet potatoes?
He got several pounds off of one plant. So I think that his mulching method is working and he was doing okay. But for other potatoes and throughout the Northwest, maybe we'll talk a little bit about this later. It's a little bit dicey.
Yeah, I think we're going to dice some potatoes and onions for Thanksgiving a little bit later in the show. And we also have freelance science reporter Jane C. Hu. Jane, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
What's new with you? What are you painting giant murals like Jas or pulling sweet potatoes?
Actually,
what's happening?
For folks who are looking at the live stream, I have dabbled in painting over the course of the pandemic. I'm terrible, but it is fun. So
is that your work behind you?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, well, it's small on my screen, but it looks lovely.
Thanks. I try to use lots of colors, so that's hopefully all you can see.
Well, thanks to all of my journalist panel for being here for Week in Review. And let's begin, of course, with this week's weather. Heavy, heavy rain for days and mudslides and floods, washed out roads. Let's see if I can get that audio.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. Just water everywhere. Massive water.
Massive water. And at least she can laugh. That's Diana Boyce in Mount Vernon, where they've got a new flood wall in town. East of there, though, in Hamilton, that whole town was evacuated, as it has been in years past. This is Fire Department Duty Officer Mark Adams.
My day's been like holy heck, but even worse on all the residents here, as the town was completely evacuated. And now they're trying to get back in town. We can't let them get back in town at this moment because we haven't inspected everything.
Yeah, you can get electrocuted by fallen power lines. The Lummi reservation was cut off by flooded roads. Tribal Chair William Jones Jr. says healthcare workers living in Bellingham couldn't get to work at the reservation's medical clinic, so the tribe had to ferry them across Bellingham Bay.
Our police boat went and picked up our doctors and nurses and brought them out to our Lummi clinic so we could continue the service. And our people out here, we're right in the middle of the pandemic here. And we're right in the middle of flu season and cold season. We have a lot of sick children and our elders that we have to take care of.
The Makah reservation on the northwest tip of the Olympic Peninsula got cut off. So there's a gas and grocery shortage there. Amazing photos of a big landslide on the washed out highway. British Columbia is under a state of emergency. Parts of Vancouver cut off from the rest of Canada. The premier there called it a 500 years event. The border town of Sumas, Washington was underwater. I could go on, science reporter Jane Hu, and we often, I think we sometimes associate climate change with drought. Does climate change play a role in these heavy rains?
Yeah, so I know that scientists are starting to talk about the climate emergency. And part of this change is that we're going to get more extreme weather of all kinds. So that also includes heavy rains.
Why is that? Does that have to do with the warmth at all?
I'm not an expert in how all of these atmospheric sciences interact,
okay.
But I do think that it's worth noting that we have had several extreme events over the last year, right? And I think that even if we're thinking about how these things are connected to each other, the fact that we had that big drought, like that big heat wave, really primed the land to be drier and for these landslides to happen.
Yeah, I heard KUOW's John Ryan telling us how warmer weather can hold more water. So either way, Jas, are you getting ready? You're a younger reporter than I am. Getting ready to do a more flood reporting for the rest of your life here.
Potentially, right? It's interesting that in introducing this topic, you talked about how, Canada was saying this is a 500-year event. I've heard it referred to as being a kind of once in a century type of event, but I think that, while that might hold true for the 20th century, for the 21st, I think that this is going to be something that we're going to see, over and over again, right? Like we got 12 inches of snow in February. It's 100 degrees days, like several 100-degree days in the summer, had one of the rainiest Novembers on record. I'm from this area. I grew up here, and it's been wild to see these types of, peaks and valleys when it comes to our weather system. So I'm actually going to have to invest in buying some rain gear, that I haven't in the 20 years that I've lived here. So.
Right. And Anna King, you in your reporting, you have linked wildfires and floods and landslides.
Yeah, when the earth is scorched in these large fires, the top crust of the land can kind of actually be crusted over, and so the rain sheds off of that, creating more and more water to inundate areas below it. And when there's no foliage and other things that act like a sponge, and there's no root systems to hold this water back, it can become really devastating. As I saw up in the Makah Valley, up in the mid 2000 and around 15, 14, that area of time, I was up and actually experienced one of these large landslide flood events. And, watching the devastation after that happened was just terrible. There was a young couple in a yurt that I saw. Their yurt was totally encapsulated, around it was all this mud and dirty water. And it was really incredible to see that. And the take home is, if you're around this flood water, you really got to watch, and you've really got to be cognizant of these landslide prone areas after wildfires if you live in those areas.
Has your side of the Cascades gotten a giant dump of rain like we have on the west side here this last week and weeks?
Some areas in the Cascade range have gotten some water and some good precipitation. But, as you come east towards the mid-Columbia, where I live, towards the Tri-Cities, up north of us in Connell, Spokane area, we just haven't seen as much precipitation. And in fact, I was talking to one of my farmer sources just a day or so ago, and he said, yeah, Anna, we've got an inch and a little bit, and that's just not enough to sustain crops like wheat that have been put into the ground, and they're coming up out of the furrow. They're several inches high, but to sustain that root system, they really need more rain than that. And this is, average rainfall, but we really need a lot to catch up from the drought.
And it just seems like a traumatic time for, I know Eastern Washington is too big to generalize about, but, and as you say, we'll talk a little about this when we're talking Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving table, but just over and over again, we keep hearing about the agricultural impacts of the weather that we've been having.
Yeah. This weather has not been kind to farmers in all types of crops, everything from I think that the only crops that did exceedingly well that I heard was eggplant this year. Oh, yeah? The eggplant loved the heat, and it didn't suffer too badly from the heat event. And they got, kind of really uplifted levels of eggplants on one farm I know. But other than that, blueberries, oysters, everything across Eastern Washington was just pummeled by that heat event and the drought and the dry conditions. Even hay, we don't have enough hay in the whole nation for the cattle herd of the US right now, because there's so much drought and there's not enough forage for those animals. So hay prices have gone really up in this fall and winter time.
Jas or Jane, any more observations, experiences from all the extreme weather, and especially this week, all the rainfall and just washed out region?
So one thing that I learned this week that was surprising to me was that in the 1800s, the Sumas used to have a lake, and colonists had come in and drained it just before 1900 after they had a really bad flood in 1896. And they just converted that whole area into farmland. And if you've ever driven through it, it kind of makes sense to you. Like, it's all very flat. It's all just very fertile, lush farmland that very clearly used to be like a lake bed. And apparently there was a 2019 report that found that that area could be flooded with as much as 3 feet of water. And it's just really unfortunate that we saw the worst case scenario happen this week.
Yeah, again, this is the town right at the border, the Canadian border on the Washington.
Right.
The border was closed up there, and I was seeing video of people kayaking and, boat rescues and all that kind of stuff. Sumas underwater.
Yeah, and I found that note about eggplant thriving really interesting. And it makes me wonder if, maybe Washingtonians will have to incorporate a little bit more eggplant into our diets, whipping out an eggplant Parmesan recipe to kind of adapt to the kind of changing conditions of agricultural conditions.
That would disappoint me because I don't care for eggplant. Yes, Anna?
Oh, I would say also in those agricultural rural areas, I was very concerned about the livestock owners in that area, because when disaster happens, livestock get really nervous and they get harder to move. And they can get really stressed out after you move them. So that can be very stressful on like livestock, like cattle or horses. They can get very sick after a movement under stress like that. We call it trailer shock sometimes. And I think that the script isn't written here about how this will ultimately affect all of that livestock in that area, because they could become sick even a week or 2 weeks after this.
How about the mint? Doesn't Washington State have a lot of mint? I think of mint as being okay with the dry.
Mint is usually an irrigated crop in Eastern Washington, especially, and in Eastern Oregon. So it usually does okay, unless like in the Yakima Valley, their water rights are under proration. So, if they don't have enough water for the irrigation, that could affect them. But usually mint is pretty okay in the heat. Although, all leaves of any sort on plants can get scalded or can kind of get burnt if the temperatures are too high.
We're talking about an excess of water this week, and that's Anna King, Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent. We've got freelance science reporter Jane C. Hu here, and the Stranger staff writer Jas Keimig. We are reviewing the week for you, letting you know what happened this week and figuring out what it means. And we're online. We're streaming the show. We're on YouTube and Facebook. You can just search KUOW Public Radio and watch as well as listen. And we're going to get back with the show in a moment. A settlement and a retirement in a long time Washington State case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll check in on Arlene's flowers and more as Week in Review continues. Don't go away.
You are listening to Week in Review on 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:21. Currently 46 degrees in Seattle, where we expect a partly sunny afternoon and a partly sunny day tomorrow.
Support for KUOW comes from Swedish, working to improve the health of others through their Health for Good campaign, a commitment to the well-being of individuals and the community through service, volunteer work, and medical care. Learn more at swedish.org/healthforgood.
Carter Subaru supports KUOW's car donation program.
This is Angela King. You know that listener support is the engine that drives public radio. But what you may not know is that a used vehicle can also help KUOW deliver its programming to our community.
This is Patricia Murphy. To make a tax-deductible donation of your car, truck, or RV, visit KUOW.org.
The KUOW car donation program is powered by Carter Subaru in Ballard, Shoreline, and at cartersubaru.com.
It's KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke with KUOW board operator Bernard Willett, cooking up eggplant and mint recipes in the studio as he's listening. Something we encourage you,
Bill. We're going to convert you.
Just don't care for eggplant, but yeah, I bet we can make it good here. In fact, we're going to be talking about some Thanksgiving food stuffs a little bit later in the show. Why are we talking about mint and eggplant? Well, because Northwest News Network correspondent Anna King over in Richland knows a thing or two about the state of agriculture there these days. And we've also got Stranger staff writer Jas Keimig and freelance science reporter Jane C. Hu. And we're letting you know what happened this week and why. You can watch the show on YouTube or on Facebook when you search KUOW Public Radio. This week, a Washington state florist whose case went to the U.S. Supreme Court reached a settlement with the same-sex couple whose wedding job she refused. And Anna King, again, this is your town. Arlene's Flowers is there in Richland. I assume you've interviewed Baronelle Stutzman more than once.
I have. And, I've also interviewed the couple that wanted those wedding flowers, Rob Ingersoll and Kurt Fried. And, it's been a drama that has just played out in different ways over these 8 years or more than 8 years. And every twist and turn, I've had to jump on it and do those reports. And it's just amazing to think that the story might be coming to a close now, at least the active part of the litigation.
Anna, for those who haven't followed the story and maybe new to Washington or not, will you remind us what happened between these Stutzman and this couple? They were friends.
Yeah, I talked to the couple, Kurt and Rob, last night, pretty late, and I just was asking them how it originally happened. And they said Rob went into the florist that they had always used, and he just wanted her to do these beautiful wedding flowers for their wedding, for their 9th anniversary. They were going to get married, and it just really was upsetting to them that she would not do that based on their same-sex marriage and on what she says is her religious beliefs. And so I was asking them a little more deeply about the flowers and what they mean in their relationship, and I thought that was really interesting. It turns out that Rob gives Kurt the flowers more often than Kurt gives Rob the flowers, and that they both enjoy the flowers. They used to both buy flowers, but then it was like too many flowers in their house all the time. So they decided that it would just be better if Rob mostly bought the flowers. And I just think those little intimate details of a relationship are really fun to know about. Just, my husband puts flowers in my bathroom. It's a safe space. Like, he always knows that it's always going to be a good thing if he puts flowers anywhere in the house. And flowers mean a lot. They're a love language for many couples. And this is just interesting that it all comes down to $5,000. I mean, 8 years of pain and emotion all comes down to a $5,000 settlement. And the couple is also going to go ahead and match that donation and give all the money to the PFLAG group in the Tri-Cities in Benton and Franklin counties. And I spoke to the head of that group last night as well. And they said that they were really excited to give this money in part to people who are transitioning in their lives. And that maybe if you were born or started life as a male and you wanted to transition to female, that you might have the wrong deodorant, you might not have makeup, you might not have the right wardrobe to continue life as you wished. And so they were just really excited that this money might go into some shopping trips for people in the Tri-Cities to kind of start their new life, initiate a new life. And I just think that that's really amazing. Also, I talked to Baronelle Stutzman, and she's not backing down off of her beliefs. I interviewed her yesterday as well, and she just basically said, look, I still believe in religious freedom. I still believe in the Constitution as she sees it, and she wants to continue to support other people who are fighting for that viewpoint. So pretty emotional day.
Yeah. Any other, do either Jane or Jas have any questions for Anna about this famous Arlene's Flowers case?
Yeah, so I guess what kind of happens next? Is someone going to take over this floral shop, or do you know what the next chapter is going to be?
So it sounds as though our Arlene's Flowers will continue as a business, and that the employees under Baronel Stutzman will continue the business. How that exactly is going to be transferred, I don't know yet, but I'm sure that some of those details will come out as we do further reporting about this. As far as the couple, Rob and Kurt, they're just really excited to kind of melt back into obscurity. They really are a private couple. They don't really like to be in the media. It's really rare that they'll grant me an interview, or anybody an interview. They have written some op-eds and they have done some communications, but they really are kind of guarded as far as like being out in the media. And so I just think it's really nice for them to possibly recapture some of their life. They're very gracious to give me some interviews over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, legally, Anna, what's been the upshot of this case? It, as you say, it's been around for almost a decade. It went to the Washington State Supreme Court, went to the U.S. Supreme Court in some form. What's been the legal power when it comes to affecting people's lives, caterers and bakers and florists working same-sex weddings?
As far as in Washington state, we have some very strong anti-discrimination laws. And just like you can't be discriminated against for the color of your skin, or your you can't be discriminated against for these reasons. And so I think that the U.S. has yet to, the top court of the U.S., the U.S. Supreme Court, has yet to really put a fine line on this. They've kind of put it back to the states always, but there is a case that is coming before the Supreme Court, or at least is under review. And so depending on how they rule on that case, there could be possibly more distinction across the United States. But as far as Washington's concerned, they're very bullish, very aggressive on this, that there should not be discrimination in businesses.
That's Anna King of Northwest News Network telling you about this week's settlement. Just $5,000 after all of that. This Washington State florist giving money to this same-sex couple, and then announcing she is done. She's retiring from the floral industry. So we'll see what comes of that. And that case headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it's Colorado. Isn't that right, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, this is Week in Review on KUOW. Again, we've also got Jas Keimig and Jane C. Hu, and I'm Bill Radke, letting you know what happened this week. For example, booster shots for all. The FDA just approved giving the booster to everybody, not just the older and more vulnerable. Now it's going to be up to the CDC, and they might okay this as soon as today, Friday, as we talk. So we'll see about that. And Jas, this is something that other states have been doing anyway without federal approval, right?
Yeah. So before this news came out, I think this morning, a wide variety of states had, just kind of bypassed the FDA guidelines and authorized giving booster shots to fully vaccinated adults, places like Colorado, New Mexico, Arkansas, Kansas, Rhode Island, Louisiana. So a really big mix of like states politically and, geographically. And I think that kind of really speaks to, concerns of surges that are happening, particularly in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And especially at this time, this holiday season, where people are, kind of finally coming together and in ways that we thought would be, more safe now, but we're seeing these kind of rises in cases. So I think that the states kind of already getting out ahead of the federal government on that speaks to people who are vaccinated already being really anxious to get that booster shot. So, and I think especially here in the Puget Sound region, you know, I know that we've talked on the show a lot about how Seattleites definitely, you know, take a lot of pride in being one of the most vaccinated cities in the United States. So I don't really think that there's going to be too much of trying to twist people's arm to get that second booster shot or that third booster shot or the first booster shot. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, not quite on the third. But yeah, I think it'll definitely be something that people are going to be lining up to do and already are lining up to do.
And our science reporter, Jane, were vaccine administrators here checking eligibility anyway?
From what I hear, no. And if you remember getting the first round of shots, you probably remember that they also weren't checking them because logistically, that's just really challenging. And Washington has, like many states, just been on an honor system. And I think, at least anecdotally, I've heard from a lot of folks that they're not quite sure if they're eligible, but they've just gone and gotten it if they feel like they're in a situation where it makes sense to be vaccinated, to be triple vaccinated, that is.
Yeah. I was having a conversation about this and with a friend of mine who had gotten the booster shot. And I said, well, why? You know, he's not old enough. He doesn't have a health condition that I knew about. And but we're close enough for me to say, why did you get the booster? And he said, well, apparently I'm an essential worker. I had to go back to the office and, you know, and the more people who get the shot, the better. And he was saying, didn't your lung collapse? Like he knew that my lung had collapsed, I don't know, 35 years ago. He said, that's an underlying condition. Go get the booster. And I looked at the website and it's, you know, and it had a list of underlying condition, even lung related underlying conditions. And I didn't see mine on the list. So I just sort of quietly folded my hands.
Yeah, and it's difficult. I think I've heard a lot of people waffling about, you know, if they feel like they should go get a booster if they're not yet technically eligible. And I do think that, you know, seeing more info from the CDC soon will help folks feel more justified in seeking it out if they want to. But it's difficult because I think some of the data has been interesting. So we know that the booster does not necessarily help with cases where people are hospitalized or actually die. So it turns out our original vaccination is still really good at that. But what it does help, of course, is actually getting a case of COVID, period, even asymptomatic cases, which is great. Obviously, that is something we all probably want, is to not get sick and hopefully to decrease the chances of spreading it to other folks. But it seems like really the challenge remains getting as many people vaccinated at all as possible. It seems like it will make a much bigger difference if we get unvaccinated folks vaccinated.
Anna, do you think the booster approval will change the mood at all on your side of the state in Eastern Washington when it comes to getting the vaccine?
You know, I think the people that have already gotten their shots are very likely to go ahead and get their booster, at least in my kind of social network that I operate in. But a lot of my close friends and family that are eligible for the booster have already gone ahead and gotten it. And I know others are looking forward to it. But I think it's also it's just really hard. There's a lot of people here that are against the vaccine, who do not feel safe with the vaccine, and who are actually fighting their employers to not get the vaccine. Several groups of workers from the Hanford Nuclear Reservation and from the Pacific Northwest National Lab are in lawsuits now against their employers, saying, hey, we don't need the vax. We don't want the vax. We already had COVID and we have natural immunity through that in some cases, and don't push it on us. And so we have had higher levels of COVID here in Southeast Washington than other parts of the state, in part because of, more people who are not vaccinated. My husband, by the way, is getting his booster today, later this afternoon, about 3 p.m. I expect he'll have kind of a man cold about it and possibly be off a little bit this weekend. But we're looking forward to having that protection in our household.
You really need to take care of him and be just extra indulgent this weekend, okay? But when we're required to show proof that we're fully vaccinated in those places where we have to show the proof, is that going to include having a booster if our second shot was more than 6 months ago? Do we know that, how they're going to handle that?
I've not heard anything about that, but I also have heard actually some discussion around whether to keep calling what we're talking about as a third shot or booster necessarily, because there's some speculation that we might see kind of a regular, even annual shot in the same way that we get a flu shot.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about being covered for, after 6 months after your second shot, that might go out the window pretty quickly as we get more guidance about what kinds of boosters we might need in the long run.
I was wondering because, people can be irrational. I'm irrational, and I could just imagine people who kind of secretly wanted the vaccine, but they didn't appreciate being ordered to take the vaccine, and everyone around them was against the mandates. But now that it's freely available to everyone, and we're not yet checking for proof of that so-called third shot, I just wondered if it might open up the idea of a shot. Well, I'm going to get, it's like a booster that I don't have to take, but it's actually my first shot. And wondering if there's going to be any significant amount of that. I don't know. I did see that the Seattle School Board asked the state to require school kids to be vaccinated once the vaccine gets full FDA approval for younger kids. And that seems like a bigger priority for Seattle than the rest of the state. Does anyone think that's going to happen statewide?
Well, I'm not quite sure. But I know that, there have been states that have made that a requirement. In California, Governor Newsom mandated the vaccine for middle and high schoolers. And already there have been some protests by families in Southern California where they've staged like massive school walkouts and major protests outside of the schools. So I could see it potentially happening for Seattle, but I think it would be something that might become a little slower on the state level.
Oh. Okay, well, I'm also going to see if I can get a booster in me before Thanksgiving. I don't really know how long it takes for any booster immunity to kick in, but
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, well, so we got what until Thanksgiving? Less than
a week.
More like a week. More like a week. Okay. Well, it'll just be what's the word? Not psychosomatic. It'll be just atmospheric. Are you all? I wonder if you all are dealing with this questions of we're going to get together, how masked, how vaxxed, how tested, what kind of test. I'm seeing, because I can see you on Facebook and YouTube as we're live streaming the show. I can see nodding heads from everybody. Are you dealing with this?
Yeah, my family has a spreadsheet that I created now of, like, are you in for Easter? Are you in for Thanksgiving? Are you in for Christmas? We're filling out this Google sheet to try to negotiate this. It gets pretty complex and it gets really hard. My family, I have about 45 members of really close knit on my mom's side. And so when we get together in one household, it's really raucous. That's not happening for Thanksgiving this year. We're all kind of going into smaller groupings to try to keep each other safe. And we're going to do a Thanksgiving Zoom to see what everybody's cooking. But it's just not the same as it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. My family is also going to keep it small this year. We're all vaccinated. There's 5 other people in my family, so it's not super huge. But I think it's more of a question of who's boosted and who's not boosted. I'm actually the only boosted family member. I got my booster earlier this month. So I definitely feel a lot more like protection around, my family, and we don't have anyone that's immunocompromised, which would be the kind of biggest factor. And last year we didn't have this Thanksgiving just because, it was the peak of the pandemic. So we're definitely keeping it much, much smaller than we normally would, I think.
I am originally from Kentucky, and I'm not traveling for the holidays, but I did just get, like the annual text thread of my high school friends talking about whether or not we should get together, and friends giving the full caveat of what their life situation is. Like, I'm triple vaxxed, like I mask everywhere I go, like at my job, this is what's going on. And it's just really interesting how much people are sharing with each other to make sure that we're all comfortable trying to get together.
We need some shorthand around that, like, so everyone knows exactly. Yeah, I'm mask, vax, non-booster, bubble. Just lay it all out there.
Yeah.
PCR,
yes, a triple shot.
Triple shot. Are you doing? In my family, we've had the PCR versus home test. I had the feeling that it was going to be jammed. I don't know if this is true, to get into an appointment to get to roll up and get a PCR test. So we're just doing home tests, which is inferior, but we're going to do it closer to the day and all that. How are you guys? Science reporter Jane, how are you all handling that?
I am still discussing with friends. I'm doing a Friendsgiving for Thanksgiving, and we're renting a house and just all hanging out and cooking together for the weekend. And there's been some talk of doing rapid tests or even PCRs, but I think as we get closer to the date, we're realizing everyone probably has that idea. I did snag some of those rapid tests early on, like a couple months ago, knowing that for the holidays, they might come in handy. So that might be the route we go. But, the folks that I'm doing Friendsgiving with, everyone has been very open about being fully vaxxed and what our usual lifestyle looks like in terms of, not going out and getting crazy at bars, crowded bars.
You think they've been open, but how do you know whether they're being open?
No, it's true. You really don't. You don't. But yeah, it feels weird to even be considering doing something like this because it's been so discouraged for the last couple of years. But we're looking forward to getting to spend some quality time together.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to do some deep research on everybody's Instagram.
Many of us are science journalists, so I think it helps that all of us at least know the risks. So,
right,
yeah, a lot of trust.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about getting on a plane. That's another level. Let's talk about Anna. You did a story about how the summer heat and the shipping crisis, the supply crisis, the mess is going to affect Thanksgiving. What did you find out?
Yeah, it was just kind of this question, like, what's on your table and how are you going to get it this year? And Ruby DeLuna and I, KUOW's Ruby DeLuna, dug into that. She tackled cranberries and stores shelves in the Seattle area, and I tackled turkeys, onions, and potatoes. And what we found out is that, you probably are going to be able to get all the ingredients that go on your Thanksgiving meal. But the problem is that some of them are a little bit shorter in supply. You might have to have a brand that you're not used to or that you don't want. And you might have to pay some more for those items. Particularly like potatoes and onions are both up about 30-40% this year, which maybe, you would say, oh, potatoes don't, cost that much, but, it's going to be a couple dollars in your pocket. And the potatoes and onions could get more crucial as the winter goes on. So for your Thanksgiving table, maybe you won't notice as much the problems, but possibly by Christmas or Easter, we might be seeing a little bit more some problems for the holiday table. That's because a lot of potatoes and onions are in these huge storage sheds. If you go into Eastern Washington, you see them on the side of the road. They look like these football stadium kind of buildings or like a soccer stadium. And they're 30 feet high sometimes in some cases of potatoes or onions. And they're in these huge storage systems that have these massive fans and air handling systems to keep the airflow going in the buildings. And those buildings could become rot zones, really, because the heat event damaged the plants under the ground. And so they're not sure how they're going to store this year. Many onions have already turned up bad, and potatoes are a lot smaller than they usually are this year, or during normal seasons. And so you will be able to find those smaller potatoes in bags for about the same price as usual. But if you want a big baking potato for the prime rib that you're planning for Thanksgiving, you're going to have a harder time finding it, and you're going to pay more.
Yikes. I'll just have a banner over my Christmas gathering says, "Welcome to the rot zone." I like that. That's a good phrase. Okay. So yeah, I enjoyed that story too. And one little silver lining was that, well, first of all, I enjoyed your evoking the turkeys in the abattoir.
Yes, that was traumatic to report on, actually.
Sorry.
I was up in the fog in Ellensburg, and it was so foggy I could barely see the sides of the road. And I was going up this gravel road, and I was trying to find this ranch, and my Google Maps kept directing me like to go off the cliff. And I was like, no, I'm not going that way.
I'm not going to do that.
But I just kept going. I got to this farm, and it was like they had pitched it to me as kind of like, well, we're going to round the turkeys up. Well, they were planning a lot more than that day.
Yeah.
And I got out of the car, and about 7 of these large herd white dogs that are about chest high surrounded me with low growls, and I was really freaked out. And then by the time I got to the turkey roundup, the turkeys were like in this trailer, and then they started dispatching the turkeys, and I was not ready for that. But it does give kind of a little bit of heart to all of these products that are on our table, all of these beautiful things that we lay before guests: cranberry sauce, the potatoes, the onions, the turkey. They all came from some sort of farm or purveyor that made that for you, and all the hard work that comes all year long to make this meal possible.
Yeah, I hope you're okay with that. And that wasn't I enjoyed the dose of reality that you're referring to, that these all come from someplace. But the silver lining part was that the local wines, Washington wines, are actually okay, for one thing, because if a good wine isn't brand new and you're opening it from the before times, and it's going to taste okay.
Right. You will likely open a pre-pandemic wine at your holiday table this year. And I think what's fun about opening a bottle of wine at the table is it's like bottled summer, right? We're in the middle of winter right now, but you're opening a harvest time, a summer joy you're uncorking. And I think that what's really interesting about wine is if you want to get a good wine, I would recommend shopping right now, bringing that bottle home, laying it on its side, and letting it rest unsettled for a while so that it kind of gets rid of the bottle shock before you open it at your Thanksgiving table.
Nice.
If you have something in the cellar, that's better yet.
All right, from the rot zone to the bottle shock, that's Anna King, Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent. We've got freelance science reporter Jane C. Hu with us, and the Stranger staff writer Jas Keimig. We're going to take a short break on Week in Review and wrap up as we tell you what happened this week and what it means. Stay tuned.
Support for KUOW comes from King Conservation District, helping to empower residents to build a more climate-resilient King County by offering education, resources, and access to native plants for home and garden through their annual native plant event. More at kingcd.org, helping build better ground.
I'm Julian Marshall, host of BBC News. On today's program, we have an exclusive BBC interview with the president of Belarus amid the continuing migrant crisis on the border with Poland. And Austria becomes the first European country to reimpose a full national COVID lockdown.
BBC NewsHour begins, just about 10 minutes from now, this afternoon at 1 o'clock on 94.9 KUOW.
Support for KUOW comes from Live Nation, presenting Trevor Noah Back to Abnormal World Tour. Comedian and host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, Trevor Noah live on stage, Climate Pledge Arena, Friday, November 26th. Tickets available at Ticketmaster.com.
You've got KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke with reporters Jane Hu and Anna King. And Jas Keimig, you wrote in The Stranger this week about the Crocodile reopening. The Crocodile was a giant deal in Seattle when bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam were playing there early before the rest of the world knew about them. What's going on with the new Crocodile?
Yeah, so on December 1st, they're going to be opening in a new space that's 30,000 square feet big. There'll be multiple venues within the venue. So there's going to be a 750 person capacity showroom, a 300 person venue, a 100 person seat comedy club and movie theater, as well as a daytime cafe, a restaurant bar, and a 17 room hotel, which is,
Wow.
I don't know if I've assumed that you visited the old Crocodile, right?
Oh,
Bill?
yes, many times.
So it's a really big change and a really big jump. But I think it's also really important to kind of talk about their reopening in the context of, other music venues here in the city. I think if you had talked to venue owners in April of 2020 or even in April of 2021, there was a lot of fear that places like Numos and Clockout Lounge and Showbox may not make it through the pandemic, right? That they could shut down and close forever. But I think from the vantage point of November 2021, things have been, we haven't lost as many music venues as we thought, right? I think we lost Rebar and Tula's, but for the most part, I feel like I can go and see shows kind of in the same way that I did before the pandemic. And in fact, I think we've even gained new places. Like there's Supernova in Soto, Cafe Racer moved from their old digs in Roosevelt over to Capitol Hill. We even have like a new music festival, Day In, Day Out, which happened earlier this summer. So I think Crocodile is, they're reopening as a part of this kind of greater kind of rebirth of the Seattle music scene. And, I think, there's a lot of nostalgia for like the 90s grunge, like Puke on the Bathroom Floor, like tons of Tall Boys, I think there's a lot of nostalgia for that. And I don't think that the Crocodile is losing their kind of soul, but they're getting this opportunity to have, to be able to feature local artists in their smaller venue, right? And kind of get them developing and knowing how to play to an audience. And they also have like a really big showroom where, big bands like Built to Spill can play 2 nights in a row. So I think I'm really excited to see it. Apparently there's going to be a crocodile skeleton replica hanging from the ceiling and tons of like natural history stuff kind of throughout the building. And I think it'll really.
They're not implying that Eddie Vedder is a dinosaur, are they?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think I'm really excited to see it and check it out and see what kind of programming they'll have.
That's great. I am not a nostalgist myself. I'm not one of the, I am old, but, but old Seattle is just old to me, it doesn't have to stay. But I know that there will be people my age complaining that that the Crocodile, it's inauthentic. It's not grungy. It's enough. It's not punky.
Well, it's like it's almost 30 years old. And as someone that's also almost 30 years old, I did like being young and like 22 and, being gross or whatever. But now it's like, I'm looking at really nice sheets, like I want to install some shelves. And I feel like the Crocodile, must feel the same way. They want something nice, and big and expansive. So
leading into your 30s.
Yes, for sure.
All right. The Crocodile gets nice things. That's good. Okay, let's we're right at the end of our hour here on Week in Review. We always end with something to smile on. I will just say that this week the 4-person group who was supposed to draw up our new congressional and state legislative districts blew it. They couldn't get it done by the deadline. And KUOW's Kim Malcolm spoke to one of the 4 commission members, Paul Graves, who said, "We worked all the way past midnight on the final night that we had to do it."
Graves also thinks there are ways to avoid this problem in future by setting a deadline 5 days before maps are actually due.
That is brilliant. It's like I tell my kids it's dinner time before the table is actually set because they're not going to wash their hands immediately. So thanks, Redistricting Commission, for that excellent fix. Anything else making you all smile this week?
This maybe won't make me smile, but Adele released her new album today. I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but you know, I haven't been divorced. No one has broken my heart recently, but I know after I finish listening to this record, I'm going to be like, you know, in a big cozy sweater, you know, ruminating on all of the loves that I've had in my life and lost. So I'm really ready for Adele to move me this weekend.
Yeah. What was the first big breakup song? Never mind, I'll find someone like you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a weeper. And I know that was a long time ago, but the critics are loving on the new album too.
Yeah, it's definitely a great era.
Anna, Jane, anything smile worthy?
For me, with all of this rain, one silver lining of that has been all of the dogs in raincoats. So my office window, which is right over here, faces my street, and I watched this dog in a little raincoat like roll on the ground for like a full minute yesterday, and it's just been a real treat seeing their cute little clothes.
That is good. Anna King?
There are not dogs in raincoats in Eastern Washington, I'm gonna say.
No, not a Richmond thing.
I'm just kidding. I think the thing that really is bringing me joy this morning are two things. Dungeness crab season opens up on December 1st. And so if you like crab, they're coming. And the officials told me this morning that it looks like a good season. The toxins are low. And so they should be able to open up full swing December 1st. And the other thing is that my 78-year-old dad, almost every morning before like the light is visible, just gives me this photo from his phone. He texts it to me, and he's on top of a mountain. He goes with a headlamp, and he goes like 4 miles in 1,000 feet of vertical every morning. And he's been doing this for over a decade. And it's just like the inertia, the chutzpah of doing that in your later life that it tells me like, I got to crack a lack because my dad is out there getting it done in the dark with a headlamp in the middle of the mountains and the woods.
Yeah. I want that. I want to be like your dad. That's beautiful.
I mean, it's awesome. Yeah. It's something to aspire to.
Thank you for the smiles and thank you for the news and the reviews and helping us sort through it all this week. It's been great to be with Anna King, Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent and freelance science reporter Jane C. Hu, the Stranger staff writer Jas Keimig. Thank you so much for doing the show today.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure. And you know, we love talking about stuff at the end of the show that makes us smile. Here's something making me smile. We're coming back to the stage in December, our first and only live show of 2021, the KUOW Year in Review. Get your tickets now. Go to KUOW.org/events and tell us what's made you happy this year. When you go to KUOW.org/events, click the big orange button and you can see how you send in your smile of the year at KUOW.org/events. And we hope to see you there at Town Hall. Everybody, that was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
KUOW Tumwater,
Thanks for
KUOW
having us.
Bellingham.
It flew by.